Procrastination. We all experience it at some point in our lives. Maybe you're one of those people who struggles with procrastination on a daily basis. Maybe you're a person where it just finds its way in your life on occasion, but it's still a problem or an issue. Regardless, this video is for you and for me, all of us who grapple with procrastination. And so what I want to talk about in this video is how we can overcome it. Because this channel, Bull and Thread, is all about clear thinking, about problem solving and decision making and logical fallacies and cognitive biases and how to discover those literal and metaphorical treasures in our lives. But what happens if we never even start? We never even try, and procrastination can have that kind of consequence. So in this video, we're going to work our way through that. We're going to look at the 5 reasons why we procrastinate, and then we're going to look at the 5 habits, the 5 things that people do who don't procrastinate as much, or the people who make it through their procrastination. It's going to happen for all of us. As we're getting to this topic, I want to start by saying something really important. Procrastination is not caused by laziness, at least not in the traditional way that we think of it. And sometimes we treat procrastination as just this moral flaw, and it's just who you are. It's an indictment on your identity. But the reality is, procrastination is something that can be dealt with. There are reasons why it happens, and there are reasons why people avoid it and why people are able to get things done without a lot of procrastination. So if you pay attention to these items, you can be in that category of working your way through procrastination, of getting things done and reducing the likelihood of procrastination. So let's go ahead and get started with the things that cause people to procrastinate. The first one is task ambiguity. You have this project, you have something you want to accomplish, but you don't have a really clear picture of what the end results looks like, or you don't have a really clear picture on the process that's needed to get to the end result. And when you're struggling with that lack of clarity, it can cause you to freeze and not want to do anything. And that is a cause for procrastination. The second one, emotional friction. We all have some measure of anxiety or fear with a big task or a project or something we're trying to solve, but there's a source of that fear that's especially problematic, which is when we are afraid that our performance on a particular task says something about our identity or our self-worth. What if I try this and I fail? Does that mean that I'm not a smart person or that I'm not a good person? Is it an indictment on my character or who I am? And so sometimes we find ourselves rather just facing the consequences of not trying than trying and potentially failing. And if we get in that mindset, if we get into that headspace, we can find ourselves procrastinating on things a great deal because we're letting that fear and that anxiety and that worry about your self-identity being tarnished get in the way. The next reason why people procrastinate, overscoping, is where you have this task and you've made it too large or undefined. It starts feeling just too big, too overwhelming for you, that you've painted this big picture of it. And the reality is that oftentimes, while you can have very big tasks, it may not be nearly as big as it is in your mind. And so overscoping can definitely be an adversary to you getting the thing done that you want to get done. The fourth one, no clear starting action. There are just too many possible first steps. And so you don't just get past that first hurdle and you find yourselves self-obsessing or procrastinating or avoiding because you're just not sure about what the best first step is. And you're afraid that if you make the wrong first step, that's going to undermine everything else. So somewhere in there, though, this no clear starting action can get in the way of us accomplishing what we want. It can lead us into greater procrastination. And then there's the fifth one, cognitive load, something that I talk about in many of my videos. Cognitive load is based upon this idea that we have senses. You have your eyes, you have your nose to smell things, your ears to hear things, your eyes to see things, all of these senses. But if you are trying to look at multiple things at the same time or hear multiple things at the same time, it can just be sensory overload and you feel overwhelmed. And sometimes when you're introduced with a project or a task and you're looking and you just see all of this stuff, it's just overloading to your brain. And that can lead us to procrastination. I don't know if you noticed, but nowhere in that list did I talk about laziness, because laziness is not the cause of procrastination. And I think that's something good for us to get out of the way. So now let's talk about the 5 reasons why people don't procrastinate. What are the habits? What are the things that people develop that allow them to not get caught into the procrastination trap as regularly as many of us? The first one is to define the next concrete action. People who are really good at getting things done, they're able to not think about the whole thing and get overwhelmed by the really big picture. And instead, they reduce the work to a single visible first step that your brain can execute. And maybe you've experienced this. If you think back in your own life, this can apply to anything from exercising to writing a paper to accomplishing something at work or to accomplishing something in some other environment. That if you just get started, you work your way through and you silence that procrastination voice or those procrastination voices in your head. And once you just get started with the first task, you begin to develop some momentum that can be helpful. The second one is people who are really good at avoiding procrastination, they shrink tasks aggressively. So these are people who lower the psychological cost of starting by making tasks feel smaller. So say you have a massive paper to write. I have multiple degrees, and so I've had to write a lot of papers. And I remember writing my doctoral dissertation, and when I was doing that, it's going to be hundreds of pages long, and that felt very overwhelming. It felt big. It was definitely the overscoping problem that I talked about before. But if I thought about it differently, I have 5 chapters to write rather than 1 paper. And each chapter has 10 sections or 5 sections. So maybe collectively it's going to be 50 different sections, but I'm breaking it down and literally breaking it down to 1 sentence, 1 paragraph, 1 page, 1 section, 1 chapter, and then collectively 1 complete doctoral dissertation. I've actually published 9 books that way. I don't write the book by writing the whole book. I do 1 piece at a time. I break it up and I shrink the tasks into something that's small enough that I find myself not procrastinating. I'm just going to write 1 paragraph today. And if I get a paragraph done, that's good enough for me. Or maybe it could just be 1 sentence. I'm going to attend to this 1 thing. It seems like a really simple habit, but it works well. The third one is starting before you feel ready. I talked about before the idea that we have fear and anxiety and other things like that, and you may not feel entirely ready for whatever it is. Maybe you feel like you have to be better, you need another skill or something like that. But the reality is people who get things done start before they're ready, and they start especially before they feel ready, because oftentimes you are ready, but you just don't feel ready. You feel like you could be more ready if you just took a little bit of extra time. And usually in most situations, the best advice is just get started. Start before you feel ready. The fourth one is design the environment to help reduce distractions or other forms of friction. Now, this depends upon what you're working on, but if you're procrastinating, sometimes it's because of that cognitive overload. You're being distracted by a lot of other places, or a lot of other things, other sources of sensory input. But what about designing a space where you can be really productive? And some people have pointed this out. There's a lot of great literature that talks about how if you have a designated space for a certain task or activity, that when you sit down, your brain and your body have been trained to get to work. And you just reserve that space for that activity. And that can work really well. Or it doesn't have to be something like that. It can also just be designing a space that has removed the distractions that are likely to pull you into procrastination. Think about it. Study your own habits and your own patterns, and you'll be able to figure out what that space might look like. And then the last one is separate starting from finishing. Sometimes people are distracted because they're looking at that finish line. As I've talked about before, it seems so incredibly far away. The scope, it just seems like something impossible. So instead of focusing upon what it looks like to be done, just focus upon starting. Focus upon this step. I've run a number of marathons in my life, and 26.2 miles seemed impossible. And even after I'd been training for a long time, it just seemed very hard, and sometimes I would dread the possibility. But when I thought about it as 26 one-mile runs, it changed. That might seem really simple, but it changed. And then as I got a little bit better, I thought in maybe larger chunks that didn't seem very overwhelming to me. But 26 one-mile runs was much more achievable for me. So focus upon starting, focus upon shorter milestones that you can stop and celebrate, take a little break, and then come back. And those things help a great deal. If you're one of those people who struggles with procrastination, I guarantee you, if you just try these out, you put them into practice, you will find that you can reduce the amount of procrastination or the power of procrastination that's happening, and then you can get on to that great problem solving and troubleshooting and creating new things and solving those literal and metaphorical treasures. I hope you find this useful. I look forward to your comments.